And welcome to today's session as part of our Springfest 2022. We are today discussing a very interesting book called The Birth of Bangladesh, an event which happened exactly 50 years ago, or 50 years and 3 months to the date, on 16 December 71, as most of you may be aware. And it was an event where, soon after the liberation of Bangladesh happened, four classmates from IM Calcutta crossed into Bangladesh, and there were two others who later on visited the refugee camps on the border. So, five of them actually co-authored this book called Birth of Bangladesh. Unfortunately, two of the four travelers are no more. So this is actually a recollection of something that happened 50 years ago, and it's very interesting that 50 years later or 49 years later, they decided to write a book. As I know that a lot of people did become authors during the lockdown, so perhaps this was one of those things. Let me introduce of the original four travelers. As I said, two are no more, but the other two are here. Mr. Pandian is a graduate from IIT Madras. He then did his MBA or PGDBM from IIM Calcutta. He then traversed to tea plantations in Assam, automobiles in Pune, and coming to rest in publishing, and then IT in Mumbai. He launched the Computer Point, which is India's first computer retail chain. He's one of the founding signatories of NASSCOM, and the 90s saw him pioneer the internet in India and advise VSNL on retailing internet connectivity. The other author that we have today is Shamal Chakravarti, born in 1948 to a family which actually migrated on partition from its roots in the Rajshahi district, which is now in Bangladesh. Shamal grew up in Western India with occasional ensemble with other family members spread all over India, listening to stories of the abandoned roads from granny and aunts. So he has some connect with Bangladesh, and perhaps he was the trigger, but I don't want to pre-disclose the story. He graduated from IIT Mumbai and or Bombay, as we discussed a little while ago, and post-graduated from IIM Calcutta, and then got into corporate life and traveled to over 60 countries and as represented in various trade fora. Retired in 2008 as chairman of BL ICICI joint venture company engaged in logistical support service. The BL here, I guess, stands for Bamaloi. Shamal finally settled in Kolkata and is actively involved as faculty and in mentoring and working in new fields and applications. There are a few other, contributors who are also here. I will not go into their introductions right now. Perhaps Mr. Pandian will introduce them as we go along. But let me also say that our moderator of the session, of the panel discussion today, is our very own Mrs. Padma Chib, who coincidentally was, along with her husband, based in Islamabad in 1971 when this war was on, and therefore she had a little peep into what was happening in Bangladesh or during that liberation. So she could perhaps tell us a little about that part of the story. Before I hand over to Padmaji, I would request our President, General Shankar Prasad, to give his words of welcome to the speakers. General Shankar Prasad.
Thank you, Raj. Good evening, all of you, my very honored panelists, and good evening, Padmaji. We normally have a literary festival in the month of February or March, but this year, because of the pandemic, we were not able to hold it, and so we were deciding to hold it on the computer in a Zoom session, which is what we are doing, and this is one of the fourth or the fifth programs that we're doing. While these book discussions are more interesting when in person, when physically, but then because of the constraints of the situation, of course, it's eased out a bit now. We are now doing this, the next one, we will now start doing the physical one. Birth of Bangladesh excites many of us who've been in the army. In fact, the 71 war, all of us were a part of that war, very much a part of that war. And I must say, this war was not only fought by the Indian armed forces, but also by the entire nation, by the entire government, by the entire set of the intelligence agencies. And this war is indeed most unique, which I don't think in modern times has ever happened. And I don't think it'll ever happen again. Uh, the preparation for this war started as early as February of 1971, maybe even earlier, which many of us don't even know, and continued the preparations till about the month of November and December, till really the war broke out. It's a very unique experience. And the subject that we are going to be discussing with our panelists and the book is about the refugees. And who are these refugees? What started the war? What made India go into this situation is something that we will be very eagerly looking forward to and seeing how these refugees were treated soon after the liberation. But in the current moment, when we are looking at the world today, this discussion becomes even more important. We have today the Ukraine war going on between Russia and Ukraine, which is now today on the 21st day. And this entire liberation of Bangladesh concluded in 11 or 12 days. A country was liberated from a tyrant force, a tyrant army led by General Niazi, the uncle of current Prime Minister Imran Khan. And what terrible things they were doing in Bangladesh. Some of these may be reflected while we listen to the speakers. But here, while Ukraine war in the 20th day, nowhere in sight of any completion, I don't see it concluding very soon. And there was another war which finished in 12 days. So what is so different? I mean, was it something very unique? And as Raj Sharma said, Mrs. Chib has got a ringside view of it. Now, many of us feel, those who are not deeply involved with this study, that it was just a battle between the East Pakistan Army and the Indian Army. But as Mrs. Chib would be very happy to narrate to you, that it is again a global issue. There was the 7th Fleet of the United States, there were the Russian submarines around there. I don't want to go in details of that, but it was as important international activity, international conflict, that as perhaps Ukraine and Russia is today. So particularly when those of us who are in the military look at this war, we look at it in a very different manner as to how we compare, although no two wars can be compared, but how do we compare the liberation of Bangladesh to the current war in Ukraine? Of course, Mrs. Chib is also a close witness to what was happening. She was monitoring through her husband. Of course, she knew everything what's going on, or what the 7th Fleet of the United States were doing, or what the submarines of Russia were doing, and how Russians were forcing us every day to speed up this operation and conclude it quickly before it becomes, out of control, and we may have to have a ceasefire, a unilateral ceasefire without liberating the country. And not only that, Mrs. Chib is also witness to the activities that took place after the war in negotiations with Prime Minister Bhutto at that time. And she even has told me by time to time that at 9 o'clock in the night, it was decided that no negotiations are possible. And in the next half an hour, negotiations began. And by midnight, they were concluded. I will not go into details of that war, but interestingly, we all want to really listen to the speakers today as to how the refugees were being treated, what refugee camp status was, what exactly was Mufti Bahani doing there, how were the refugees handled. All of that makes very interesting study for all of us who are interested in matters concerning security. So without taking any more time, I'd request Mrs. Padma Chip, who is a very honored member of our committee. She's actually a chairperson of the Library Committee Emeritus. She's the one who started book club many years ago, and she continues to do it with all her passion. Mrs. Chip, thank you so much for being on the panel today, taking all the trouble of reading the book and discussing these issues. Please, over to you.
Thank you so much, General Shankar Prasad, and also Raj. And I'm very glad that we are doing this book today. And welcome to all the guests who are there. So, I'll also go briefly to the history. We were posted in 1968. My husband was posted as Deputy High Commissioner to Pakistan. And in 69, Yahya Khan took over as the presidency and declared martial law. Of course, martial law was nothing new to Pakistan. When I told my Pakistani he had been with us for quite a few years, first in Karachi, our first posting, and then when we were in Islamabad, he was again there. I told him martial law has been again declared. And he said, well, it's all right. It's very common in Pakistan. So that was it. Anyway, Yahya Khan did hold elections in 1970. And the election result, though obvious to everyone but to the West Pakistanis, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman won with a large majority, but this was not acceptable to the West Pakistanis, the Punjabis and the Sindhis. This was not acceptable, neither to the army, that he could now, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman could become the president of Pakistan. So they started negotiations, but they broke down. They sort of, he declared then that, well, if you don't want me as the president, then I declared that Pakistan, we are now two countries, and we declare independence. So it was in March 1971 that Mujibur Rahman declared that East Pakistan will be Bangladesh. Of course, the Pakistan didn't accept this. Naturally, I mean, immediately they wouldn't. They sent the army, they sent the Razakars, and the civil war had begun. They also, I think, took the Mujibur Rahman again was taken prisoner, and the civil war started. And it was not just the civil war, but the army, Pakistani army, and the Razakars were just killing innocent people. They were not on the discrimination of caste or creed or anything, but they were just sent there to, they were looting and vandalizing, and they were murdering children and families. So it was different from the war now. They are fighting a war. At that time, they were their own people who they were killing. The Pakistan army was killing, raping, doing all sorts of things. So what was the next step? Naturally, refugees started pouring into India. And though we tried, of course, we were there. It was hardly a border between us, and they were pouring into India. Innocent people, naturally in bad state, people of all religions, castes were coming into India. And but by summer of 71, I mean, Indira Gandhi, our prime minister then, had tried to get in touch with all the world leaders. None of them, I mean, America never came to our support even then. And it was all left to us. And of course, then by the summer of 1971, she had decided that we can't just sit back. We will support our forces, though didn't the war, armed forces didn't enter, but they had started training the Mukti Bahini. Now, in West Pakistan, what could Bhutto do? He was, of course, he was very upset. He was very angry. He hadn't been made the prime president. So what could he do? His anger was all on the Indian diplomats, because we were the ones who were there, or the Bengalis who were there. So what did they start? They started with mobs and all that started coming to outside our chancery doors. That means the embassy where the offices were. They started entering. They tried to burn the embassy. Police and CID people would be sitting outside. They were always there, but they never took any action till, of course, you then got in touch with the Foreign Office, and they did. And then again, there were mobs. They came into our homes. They sort of started breaking our doors and, glass, throwing stones. In fact, one of the diplomats who was our ambassador later in various countries, and he was the, I think, second secretary or first secretary then. He lives in Basant Vihar. I won't name him, but they entered his house with his wife and two small children. Twin daughters were there. She had the courage to go up and lock herself in, but they vandalized the whole house and all. After that, of course, my husband, who was then the acting high commissioner, took the decision that all the people from the non-essential staff, and especially the families, were to go back to India. They were sent back within a week. But I think just to keep up some normalcy, I stayed down there, and our military advisor and his wife with their two sons were there. So ultimately, in November 71, our forces entered, and then it was a war. And the war properly started in what is now Bangladesh. Of course, Pakistan then reacted by they attacked us India on the western side on the 3rd of December. And that was the time when, of course, the war really began on this side. And they, for us who were there, they took us as, put us under house arrest. And not only that, I mean, my husband had told all those who were living there that they should be having enough rations. Money was to be out with them, not in the banks. They were to have all the medicines. They were given a list. We had an Indian doctor from the Indian Army who had been posted in our embassy to look after the Indians. But I had all the medicines, but the medicine I needed that day, I ran out of. And I asked my guard to go and, I mean, he was, Peshori was his name. He was a Hindu, but he was living there. So I sent him. He brought the news to me that, but the shops have all closed. I said, what's happened? So it's about 6 o'clock only. And he said, used to call me Begum Saab there, and they said, Begum Saab, ladai shuru ho gayi hai. I said, really? And I said, where's my husband? He said, but Saab to has gone to the office. 3 hours ago, he's been in the office. You were asleep, I think, in 2 hours or something, and he has gone. And he didn't come back till 10 because it was the whatever last minute cutoffs they have to do, he was doing there, and he came back, and yes, the war had started. And the Pakistanis did not allow the doctor to give me the medicines the next morning. They did not allow that. And my neighbor, who was a Malaysian, saw all this, and she told me, because we could talk across the wall, and she said, tell me the name of the medicine, I will bring it for you. She brought, Ramzan had started, and so she told me, what about your food? I said, we have enough rations, don't worry about that. But she said, anyway, at night, when it's dark, I will be putting on the door, on this fence between us, whatever I can get of fresh food will be there in boxes. You get it picked up. So, of course, they shifted up the next morning because one neighbor was a Malaysian and the next neighbor on the other side was a Russian. So we were shifted to a house to where our military advisor was also there, which was good actually for me. We were all ready to leave at any time. But then, of course, the war had started. We were there. And every morning we were woken up by our planes bombing into Pakistan. But they never ever bombed the civilian areas. It was only the airports or the oil depots or something, but never ever was they bombed. But of course, we were under house arrest, except for my husband, who was allowed to go and meet with the Swiss, of course, when we recognized Bangladesh on the 6th of December, and Pakistan broke relations with us. And after that, the Swiss government became sort of our protectors here and for the Pakistan embassy there. And he used to go out and look, meet his staff every morning to see they were all okay and all. But the rest was history till on the 16th of December when Pakistan admitted defeat. And on the 17th of December, a new country had been born, Bangladesh, by a cesarean section by the Indian Army, which was the doctor, I would say, the gynecologist. So they had successfully achieved their thing. And we were relieved too, but we were repatriated on the 21st of December, when both Pakistan and Indian diplomats, and in the middle somewhere was the time when our planes crossed each other. So now, Mr. Pandian, I hand over the baton to you to take over what you saw after the birth of this and how you decided to go on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ch. It's really an honor for us to have this introduction by you and General Prasad. Hearing what you just now said, actually, it just gives me goosebumps, because what we have done, actually, we've written a book of our experiences as students 50 years ago. And Bangladesh independence war, from whatever I have read about and done some background research, seems to have been one of a unique kind in the world history. And there has been a tremendous amount of professional, that is defense personnel and others who were involved in this. For us, we were just students, we were civilians, And our experience was purely in the role of civilians, just experiencing, seeing what war does to people, civilization. I will just go a step behind and talk about how we decided to go for this trip. On 16th of December, the war, the announcement came on the radio that surrender has taken place. It was a very exciting kind of news for us, because when we entered the institute as youngsters, we were going and joining a premier institute of management. We were just expecting to have a great time. Apart from studies, maybe have a good time. There's a certain amount of thrill, but we got almost immediately, July, August timeframe, into the the dark mood of the nation in terms of war and what was happening in the neighboring country, which is just a few kilometers away. And this built on us over a period. And when 16th of December, the announcement came, it was an impulsive, almost an instantaneous kind of a reaction from us, saying, let's go across, let's just go into Bangladesh. Even today, 50 years later, none of us is able to answer what made us actually take that decision. The only thing that came to us at that time was that we need to find at least one of us who speaks Bengali. That's how, Shamal's load came, because 4 of us who traveled into Bangladesh, 3 of us South Indians, barely, understanding Bengali, and Shamal also had a handicap in the sense he had grown up in the Western India. So when we decided, we had no plans, no clarity in terms of what we are going to do. We said, let's cross the border and keep going. It was like we didn't even decide when we left the institute whether we're going to go to Dhaka, we're going to go further. And the only thing we knew that time that we should reach the border town called Bongong, which is close to the border, and we would be able to cross the border. And we have actually taken 1 full week to go up to Dhaka and come back in that trip. This book itself actually has, General Prasad mentioned about the refugees. This book has 3 parts. One is about the trip itself. The second is 2 of the authors have traveled to refugee camps, and they've also crossed into the border short distances. And the third part is our observation of what was happening in the environment. The book, when we decided to write in the early 20, it was not driven entirely by the pandemic. We realized, we were in our golden jubilee year of joining the institute, and we got talking, and we were not confident initially that we were going to be able to remember what happened to us 50 years ago. Interestingly, a series of Zoom calls among ourselves, we kept talking, and we are thrilled that we were able to recollect almost everything that happened in the trip. The trip itself, I will talk about. I will ask my friends to talk about the refugee trip. The trip has actually 3 kinds of experiences that we went through. First was, since we didn't have a plan, we spent most of the time walking, and sometimes we were lucky to get transport or something or other help us. And when we actually decided to cross the border, would you believe it? We actually took a train to cross the border. We reached Bongong, and that night there was first refugee train leaving for Bangladesh. The train was fully packed and loaded, and it was the Indian Railways train with the engine carrying a banner, Bangladesh Railways. And we somehow managed to get in there, despite refugees not initially allowing us inside. We reached Jessore, and we got on at Jessore, and we are still trying to figure out where we should go. We said, let's start walking. And as we were walking, we just realized that we probably should follow a metal road, which will take us to some place, because we don't know what is coming after that. We didn't have a map. We didn't have any kind of directory to get us going in a particular direction. So when we were going, maybe we walked about 20 kilometers, and suddenly we heard a jeep behind us, and it was an Indian Army jeep. It was a major traveling in the jeep with a couple of soldiers, and we asked for a.
We first got a bus.
I know. I sort of skipped that because I'm trying to keep tight time frame, because I want to say so many things about the book. So actually, this is something very specific I want to talk about. The major actually initially pulled us up, told us, you guys so young, and are you stupid? Then he said, okay, I'll give you a lift. So he got onto the lift. Some distance away, we are nearing Madhumati River, and a military police vehicle comes on a motorcycle, and they tell the major, sir, you cannot carry civilians in the jeep. And he told us to get on. He said, you walk. And he went away. Then we crossed the river, Madhumati River. The entire nation has so many rivers. Crossing the river meant, you get onto a barge, spend 5 minutes, and you're across the short rivers that you're crossing. And we crossed and walked a little distance away. And then we find the jeep was still waiting. And he says, come on, jump on the jeep. I'll take you some more distance. It was along the way, he visited villages of the road. And each village that we went into, one thing that struck us very, very strongly is the pathetic condition of the people in the villages. They were poor, they were starved, they were looking so badly affected by various things. But as soon as the jeep would enter the village, they will let us sit around the jeep, in a big circle with some, very warm look in their faces. They would bring coconut, they would come and garland the major. And it was such a spontaneous kind of expression of, feeling good about the Indian Army being there. And we saw that along the way in a few villages that we went. Then finally we reached the outskirts of Faridpur, and he said, okay, I'm going somewhere else. I can't take you any further, and you get off. And this is something that repeated again and again in our entire trip. Either from the people, the Bangladesh people, the villagers that we were interacting with, the kind of warmth they showed us, or the, primarily a lot of Indian Army personnel that we interacted with. They were so helpful to us. Not to say it was a holiday trip. We did see a lot of very, very painful experiences of people, very disturbing experiences. I will talk about a couple of them a little later. There were also moments where we were scared. We were scared that, we made a mistake. We probably shouldn't have come here. That kind of experiences came. So from Faridpur, we took a boat ride, which we thought would take 2 hours. And we actually took the whole night. The boat went down Padma River and went up Meghna River. And finally, we landed in a place called Narayanganj. From there, we walked a couple of hours of walk. And then we still have the same situation. We don't know where we are going to go. We are entering Dhaka. We are at the outskirts of Dhaka. And we were telling ourselves.
You can show the map now. You can show the map.
I think, yes. I'll share. Okay. I have talked about going to Bangong, Jessore, Faridpur, and from Faridpur, the river, Narayanganj, and we had walked to Dhaka. So Dhaka, we are still trying to figure out. It was early morning, and we saw a mosque and a few other buildings, and we saw one place which looked like a stadium. We decided to go and explore, and we walked into the stadium, and the world changed suddenly. We found a fairly large contingent of Indian Army personnel, and initially we were questioned, and we were asked, why we were there and things like that. And they were curious. How can you guys, 4 of you, just suddenly decided you're here with us? And then they got friendly with us. They actually gave us breakfast. We hadn't eaten for a whole day. and everything else that goes with it. And then I said, okay, you can come along with us. And suddenly the day changed for us. From a situation of not knowing how we're going to go around Dhaka, we were suddenly in the midst of a group of army people who had come from Chittagong for a day's look around of Dhaka, and they had specific location they were going. The first place we visited was the Dhaka airport. I would like to show you another picture. Just give me a moment. Is it clear? Are you able to see this?
We are still seeing the map.
Yeah, no, you're still seeing the map? Okay, just a moment. I have to change that. This is a picture of a crater on the runway of Dhaka Air Force Station. It was like geometrically measured kind of a thing, regular intervals. Indian Air Force had bombed this runway. These craters were there, and we were able to, of course, this picture shows some other people, but these are not pictures that we have taken. We were able to stand at the edge of these craters and see this is what the Indian Air Force had done. And we went to Governor's bungalow. We were taken right into the governor's cabin where fighting had happened and things like that. And the day went on. We went to so many other places. Finally, the end of the day, the last place to visit was the house of Mujibur Rahman. And the army people told us that this is the last point, and after that we are going back. You guys are on your own. And we were again back to what I was telling you earlier. We have to figure out what we're going to do next. We are already 3 days in Bangladesh, and suddenly we get a call from inside the house to come inside. And we were introduced to two other people who were youngsters like us, a girl and a boy, and they were part of Mujibur Rahman family. And they were curious that they heard about some Indian students visiting Bangladesh on their own, and we talked to them, and they said, "Where are you staying the night?" Said, "We haven't figured that out." Said, "Don't worry, we'll tell Mukti Bahini to help you." So we actually were taken, the Mukti Bahini youngsters who were with us. We spent 2 very memorable days with them. They shared with us how they left college and joined the resistance movement, how some of them went to Indian camps for training, and a lot of their experiences about how they became part of Mukti Bahini. And they actually took us to the engineering college hostel, which was empty, and gave us a room to stay. And this is the same engineering college which had the unfortunate experience of their students and the faculty members being pulled out and being shot at, and the history books talk about it. And they took us around next day and so on. We spent a very memorable couple of days in Dhaka, seeing lots of those historical places. Then the time came for moving on, and the Mukti Bahini people advised us to take a different route from the one that we took. And maybe they had a reason to tell us, because in that route is when I will just go back to the So from Dhaka, we took a different route, Manika and Daulatira. So we crossed the river, which is just after Padma and Brahmaputra join. It was like crossing a sea. And just one very painful experience, even now when we think about it, is we had stopped. There were some buses traveling, so we were taking those short trips in a bus. So the bus stopped and we were told to wait for another bus. And we saw at a distance a pond where some people are doing something. We said, and we also saw some heaps of white things at on the edge of the pond. And we went nearby, and we saw there were human bones. And the villagers actually told us how the soldiers, Pakistani soldiers, had come and massacred people, and they just dumped their bodies in that pond. And 3 days after the liberation, they were just taking out the remains of those people from the village, and they were just thinking, and such a painful experience for us. It took us many hours to even overcome the kind of impact, for us. This is something which stayed with us all these years. So we moved on. Another such experience was in the place called Janeda. The good part of that experience was we saw a lot of youngsters working with the people there, rebuilding the houses that were all blown up, and there were ruins that they were without a roof also. And these youngsters who were students had given up their college, and they were spread around the various parts of the country trying to reconstruct the houses. And in the evening, we were standing around talking to the villagers, and suddenly one man came with blood-soaked clothes. And the story was that his family had been butchered while they were in hiding. One of the razakars had revealed their location to the soldiers. And this particular man escaped because he was traveling for some business outside. When he came back, he was in hiding. Immediately after the liberation, he started searching for the razakar. So that day, he went, located him, chased him, and he murdered him. So he was standing in front of us, holding the knife, fully blood-soaked. And it is a kind of experience where you try to make sense of it. We are not soldiers to have seen those things. And was it justified because of what happened? Was it a crime? And that's something which we could not even visualize at that time. Even later years, we could never really answer those. Further experiences, we were actually surrounded by some people who were dressed like soldiers, and we were poked in the back by bayoneted. Shamal and I were caught in that. Of course, we survived that experience. That was just a group of vandals. That's why we are here able to talk to you. So I can go on talking about this. So I'd like to now hand over to Shamal if he wants to add and bring in my friends Devasis Gupta and Shankar to talk about the refugee camp. I mean, it took us 1 week to complete this. So we are back in the institute on 25th of December 71. Okay, I hope I was able to share some of the things that we have talked about in the book. Shamal, would you like to? Can't hear you. You're mute.
Yeah, I would like to just add our experience in Dhaka in the sense that we found we wanted to understand that in our country at that time, the newspaper were reporting certain things. We wanted to know what was being reported in their newspaper. And one of our friend, Clement, who is no more with us, he was particularly interested, and he went around to the Raddi, the old newspaper places. He tried to collect a lot of papers, and we went through those papers as to what kind of things were being reported in those papers. So this was another very good intellectual exercise we did. And of course, we had to later pay for it, because a lot of literature which Clement collected was, very good books were being sold at very throwaway prices. So he had collected a lot of such books, and he had a jhola, typical that Marxist jhola type bag. In that jhola, he had kept these books. And later, when we were trying to cross over from Janeda into
Gede, yeah.
At the Gede railway station, all through our journey, we had more or less a safe journey. But when we came back to Gede, the problem started with the Indian police at the Gede railway station. Because they were typical, the Bengali who speak only Bengali, and all the three typical South Indian who would not even be speaking proper Hindi, forget Bengali. So that was the situation, and they thought that we are perhaps Naxalites or some agents like that, and we faced a lot of problem at the Lady Railway Station because we had crossed over at almost at night 2 o'clock or so, and we had to wait for the first train which will start at 6 in the morning. So we were waiting there, and we had that experience. And this lot of literature that were collected, they became a handy as if for the police to say that we are the Naxalite people, etc. But ultimately, our I card and a threat to them that we will give a ring to our director and you will all be in soup if you try to harass us. That's what made us escape, and that's how we landed. And I just wanted to add that part of. Thank you. I think Shankar can add.
Debo, would you like to go, or Shankar, would you like to go?
I'll do it because
okay.
My visit was actually to the Bongao camp. This is the Bongao camp, and this took place around October. Okay, and the whole objective was that at that point of time there was something like 7-8 million refugees who had crossed the border. There were several camps spread all across West Bengal, Assam, Tripura, and international aid agencies like Oxfam were wanting to aid the refugees. Now, they had been sending in a lot of material, but somehow they got the feedback that the material was not right. And so they asked the Indian Institute of Management to do a market survey over there in the refugee camps to find out what exactly the refugees needed. So there was this professor of ours who took 2 groups across, and we went across to Bongao, and the whole day we spent there. And that was quite an eye-opener because we were just across the border. There was a huge field where there were hundreds of tents, and all the tents were packed with people. As you can see, that was right at the end of the monsoon, so the fields were very slushy and everything, and there had been a cholera outbreak, and people were just trying to recover. We went across over there, and we conducted a survey in Bengali where we asked all the refugees as to what exactly they needed and whether the aid which was coming in was meeting their requirements or not. And what they told us was that everything was coming from the West. The West thought that it was winter out here because it was October, November, and so they were sending thick woolen clothes. Whereas we were still at the end of summer over here, and what they needed was thin vests and lungis and dhotis and things like that. And so the quality of clothes and what they were getting did not match. So this was a feedback which we gave. They said they wanted a lot of medicines because of the outbreak of cholera. So that was also something which we informed everybody. One thing which we noticed was that there were a lot of old people and young people, but none of the youth were there. Say males from the age of 20 to 55 or so were totally missing. And we realized that, they had either been killed or they were gone and joined the Mukti Bahini. And this was quite an experience. So we got all the feedback from them and fed it back to Oxfam. And happy to say that, they changed their aid policy after that. And hopefully we made a bit of difference in aiding the refugees out there. Shankar, over to you.
Shankar, would you, I just noticed Hawk is there and Conor Visnathan are there. You could go last along with Mani, because both of you actually were in the visit to the refugee camp. I just like to...
Pandan, may I suggest you stop sharing so that we can see all the speakers together?
Oh, yeah, right. Sorry. Yeah. Mr. Hawk is there, Mofidul Hawk. He is the Chief Trustee of War Liberation Museum in Dhaka. he has actually helped us very immensely in getting some information, pictures that we were looking for at that time. And he was part of the resistance movement in 71. So he has live experience there. Would you like to go with some thoughts, Mr. Bob?
It's my pleasure to be with you. You were the bunch of young students, and I was also a student, maybe senior to you, in my honors final year at Dhaka University. And for us, it's a lifetime experience. It will be an understatement. We have witnessed the history and how the nation stood in resistance and what turmoil and trouble they went through and what great sacrifice the people has made. And so we are now, after independence, we have been in different profession, but few friends got together in 1996 when we were celebrating 25th anniversary of our independence. And we decided that nothing has been done actually to preserve the memory. So we made a call that we will establish a Liberation War Museum, and we need the assistance of the community, of the people, and we were overwhelmed by the support we got. Now it's an institution which has been recognized both nationally and internationally as a place for archiving and documenting the history of the emergence of Bangladesh. So for us, when we came in contact with you, the whole group of the IIM alumni, we find it very, very fascinating that you made a decision. And I think all major acts of life are made like this, not calculating, not just you felt the urge and you jumped into it, and you have witnessed I would say, the first day of freedom of Bangladesh. So you entered into Bangladesh, you took the journey, and when we came to know about it, we tried to assist you in whatever we can. And the book is fascinating to us because it is a collective memory, and you have presented it together, and it not only looks into the life inside Bangladesh, but also in the refugee camps. And in that sense, it gives a good overview of the days of our liberation and first days of our freedom. And I can say that there are many, many small incidents, anecdotes, which are many interesting to us, like the visit you have made to the governor's palace. And we have been also to that palace on 16 December in the evening. It was abandoned, and everything was all around it is in shambles. And it was the place where the governor and his chief military advisor, Major General Rao Parmanali, used to stay. And Major General Rao Parmanali is one of the most brutal generals, and the intellectual killing was done under his planning with the collaboration of the religious fundamentalist forces, Al-Badr, and which is made a deep scare into our collective memory. And so also we have been to the house of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. In that house, actually, the family members were kept in confinement. So all these incidents, I think we can link it with the experience of that time. And also, I think maybe with the dissemination of the information, maybe someday someone will come up who has been part of your journey. And your journey is really, really a fascinating journey. And I do not go into much detail, but I found many, many part of the story, the boat journey that you have made, and to from Faridpur to Naranganj, it is called Matai Ghat, and usually the ships for Gwalanda. I mean, at that time from Dhaka, you have to take the journey to Naranganj and board a ship and go to Gwaland, which is in Faridpur. But now you have the road, and you also followed the road connection when you came back. So you have made a journey also, which is the route of many, many people. And and now that journey is not made by anymore by anyone, but you have traced the historical routes, you have crossed a path which is in your youthful experience. I found that after 50 years, you find it that let us tell the story. And I think this is the way actually people memorialize, people keep, I mean, it's a kind of a public documentation, and it is maybe there are some lapses and flaws, but that doesn't matter. It's the collective memory of a time which is about 50 years ago, but which is very much part of the history and struggle of Bangladesh. So we congratulate you from Bangladesh, and one day we would like that you come together.
Yes, very much, very much.
To Dhaka,
yes.
You visit the museum,
Yes.
and maybe the engineering university or other places. Some other places are still like that. Some maybe you will not be able to identify, but I think that journey will be.
You may not be able to identify most of the places, I guess. 50 years is a long time.
But to make the journey, I think down the memory lane.
Yes,
and
very much, very much. We're looking forward to it. Yes,
so,
very much. Yes.
So we also look forward to meet you and greet you at the Liberation War Museum, Mukti Juddha Jadughar. And we thank also General Shankar and also our wife of our diplomat, and they played a very important role, I think, in very difficult time, and we have also high respect for them. So thank you all, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this very, very fascinating memorialization.
Thank you, Mofidul. Actually, it is really fantastic that you could join us. And I would like to now invite Colonel Visnathan, who has physically been there just a few months ago. And he was part of the war effort in Bangladesh in '71, and he has traveled to Bangladesh when they celebrated the Golden Jubilee celebrations of December 16. Please, sir, your experience. And I'd like to just also highlight the fact that you had retained a news clipping which you were able to present to Mr. Hawk.
Yeah, I don't know whether Mr. Haq could be remembering that. We met at the Indian High Commissioner's lunch, and I told him about this newspaper cutting which I have got, which I had with me of the morning news, which in fact was mentioning about, that was the only newspaper at the time at Dhaka. And in bold letters, they had said that Bhutto had agreed to release Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So I had handed over to Mr. Haq, and he has, I think, taken it and placed it in the War Liberation Museum. Yeah, but we get back to the book. I must really admire four of you, because I mean, writing you out just barely out of your teens. This was very impulsive action on your part. Very adventurous. I can't imagine. I think you must be the first 4 Indians, other than, of course, the Indian Army, who must have gone into Bangladesh like this without absolutely no preparation at all. You see, you didn't carry anything with you. You just went there just like that. You didn't even have a camera. But the thing is, I wish you had brought out this book earlier. Then you could have probably recollected many more incidents also. And also the names of the people who helped you en route, the army officers on the way, and at Dhaka also you met a regiment. You don't recollect exactly which
that's that's the only regret, you know, when we are writing the book.
It's been nice, and the people who helped you, of course, because
so much.
You know, you visited Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's house, which of course at 32 Dhanmandi, which was where Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and 19 others were killed, including his 3 sons. And now that has been converted to a museum. I was very fortunate that I was part of the delegation which went to Dhaka recently for the Liberation 5th Golden Jubilee Liberation Day, and I was able to see and witness all these things. Thank you. The book was very nice. I must really pay a lot of credit to all of you at that very young age, particularly 3 of you from South. I mean, where I don't think we are very adventurous type, the South Indians really, and just barely out of your teens. It's really very interesting and amazing to me.
Thank you so much. Actually, we wish, you know, we could have joined you also. That would have been very nice. We are looking forward to going to Bangladesh as soon as possible, you know, when things open up a little more. And I'd like to invite Shankar and Mani. You decide between the two of you, because both of you are in the team that visited the other refugee camp. It will be interesting to hear your After there is a question here, which I'll answer after you finish.
Yeah, Mani, would you like to say a few words about our trip? I think you are on mute, I think.
Yeah, you.
Mani is a member of the club. I think he was also part of our book. He didn't write it, but we have.
I should confess, this book was a sudden news for me. I didn't know this book was coming out so early in 2022. I was in US on a holiday, and Pandian told me get it through Amazon and all that. I was in a hurry. I told Shankar, you please buy the book and send it to me. I'm reaching on 26th January. It should be there. And it was there. Thanks to Shankar for getting me these books. And I read it. It was never stopped. I finished reading it in about 1.5 days. And I could relive the earlier days and the moments when we had gone. I had gone only post-liberation in the month of February, along with Shankar, who happens to be my cousin, and both of us are from the same institute, IIT Madras. I was in a profession in Burnpur with Martin Burn Limited, and during a weekend, we got an opportunity to go there thanks to a voluntary organization called Caritas, who were carrying out certain humanitarian assistance. And they had a team of a lot of Keralites, and many are doctors. They were giving more of medical help to all these refugees. And for me, it was an adventure because of insulated life in Delhi, and then in IIT Madras, and then in Burnpur in hostels and work atmosphere. To go for an adventurous trip like this was a welcome thing. So a few of us, maybe 8 or 10 of us, then I told Shankar, can you also join? I will pick you up in Dum Dum. Then we started the journey. And in 2 hours, we reached Petropol near Bongan. And we had one day, that day we didn't eat. We saw a lot of things which are very painful, humbling, and overwhelming. I mean, there was no use for the cash which we had in the pocket. I was earning at that time. But there was no requirement for cash. They wanted water. And when I compare with today's TV, when it was available, and the sort of dispensing mechanisms which we have to distribute items which we see today and we take it for granted, was just not there. Some aluminum tumbler and aluminum plates and pots of water, that's all. And they had to fend for themselves. And to see abject poverty, malnutrition kids, hunger, and they don't know what is going to happen in the next hour for them. No firewood, no food, no clothes, no shelter, nothing of everything. And it was a very, very humbling experience. And I think let Shankar take part in that. I can say one thing: on our return journey, none of us spoke anything to one another. We were all shocked, and we didn't have dinner. And it took us quite some time to get into a stage that we recovered. And when I went to Burnpur, when I narrated to some more friends, they were just astonished. I said, Subbu, you went all the way to Bangladesh? You took off from the factory? I said, yes, I did take off from the factory, but the whole experience was really, I mean, it's a God-given opportunity. That's all I can say. And I made use of it. And I feel very humble at the end of the day. And even after 50 years, I can recollect and I can relate day to day in this World War III sort of thing situation. And no communication system, nothing whatsoever. So I would like to end there. Let Shankar describe the way he saw the same situation.
Yes, thanks, Mani. In fact, as he had mentioned, refugee crisis arising out of any war is something which is not a very good thing. And right now we are also in the midst of another war, which could become a major issue for many countries. And in fact, even this Ukraine war, they are telling about 4 million refugees might ultimately end up in a lot of problems. And it was in February 1972, it was little after things have somewhat settled. And in fact, I would like to make mention about one sentence from John Drury, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, who has given this quotation in Testimony of 60, which is some of the sayings from global personalities have been presented in the book also. And he says, I found it impossible to shut away memories of what I saw in the refugee camps of West Bengal and along the trails leading out of East Pakistan. In that corner of my mind reserved for other horrors. In fact, he has been a witness to other wars like Korean War, Vietnam War, things like that. The effect of sword, fire, and starvation differ very little in degree on the individual body and spirit. In fact, I also mentioned my experience in the book. There were two parts to our witnessing the exact way the camp was maintained. The first one was we really went and approached a small hut, and it was a very very small hut. Maybe maximum 3 people can occupy that. But one good part of that was it was exceptionally dry and clean. And there was one young lady with a baby in her arms. And I mean, as a lad of, at the age of 21, I could feel that what is exactly the empathy. And the kind of look which she gave us, it was a very blank look. And it is, we really could not interact much with her. And maybe she had lost her husband, or maybe she had lost properties. And all that we could see was few vessels kept over there, simple vessels, like Mani mentioned, made of aluminium and things like that. And for me, definitely it was first time experience of pathos and the empathy, things like that. And from there we moved on to another place which was very close to the border. We could see the no man's land, and there were a lot of hundreds of refugees walking across from the East Pakistan side. Of course, by that time it was definitely Bangladesh towards India with a lot of hope. In spite of the fact that we have had a lot of problems of our own, but still they found the land across, that is our country, was a better place. And we saw people carrying children and whatever little belongings they had. And it was raining at that time, and not very heavy, but it was a continuous rain. But they were not at all mindful of all the things happening around them. So there were the two sides, like yin and yang. So the one side, we could see the pathos, and the other side, people walking across, taking all the trouble with a lot of hope. And that was a kind of impression which had made it is a very lasting impression in my mind as well as memory. And to this day, I still remember the sight of the poor woman and also the lot of refugees walking across, which matched with many of the pictures reported in the media of those days. And it was, as Mani says, it was a really humbling experience for both of us, and also his friends from Indian Iron and Steel Company, Burnpur. With that, I'll conclude my talk. Thank you.
Raj, do we have a few more minutes? Can I just bring in a couple of other things quickly?
Can we raise some questions, or can we make it into a little bit of discussion if you like?
Yeah, we can. Actually, just wanted to touch on two things. One is the environment. I can just take a couple of minutes. The civilian society, the world ignored the entire war at that time. But, we just want to highlight one very interesting thing that we came across. We couldn't include in the book because we couldn't get the text. Shoeshine Boys of Bombay at that time, they donated 1 day of their earnings for the Bangladesh war effort. And that is something that appeared in the news, and there's a news picture also showing Keshav Mahindra walking up to a shoe shine boy and getting his shoe shined. I mean, this is how the world reacted. There were also, of course, in Brabant Stadium, there was a major concert, the concert of Bangladesh in Madison Square Garden. Well, the governments and other agencies which should have come forward ignored the war and what was going on in Bangladesh. This was happening in parallel. You've talked about it briefly in the book. I just wanted to touch on this. And there was also this, maybe a couple of sentences, Devu, you can talk about the testimony of 60, which very powerfully brought out what is happening in Bangladesh.
Yeah, actually what happened was that, as you are well aware that Richard Nixon and USA was totally pro-Pakistan and, were refusing to face reality about the all this thing, torture and various other atrocities which were being conducted in their erstwhile East Pakistan. And Senator Edward Kennedy was, on a visit to some of the refugee camps. It was at this time that a whole lot of intellectuals decided to, prepare a booklet, which is known as the Testimonial of 60, which included, Mother Teresa and a whole lot of other journalists and, who had first-hand experience of, what had happened as far as Bangladesh was concerned. And this entire thing was prepared and handed over to Senator Edward Kennedy. And he went across to the US Senate and, he presented it over there and said that, what Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger and others are giving you is only one side of the story, but the reality is somewhat different. And this was shared all over, and this made a major impression also. Not that it, swayed US political decisions too much, but, as far as international viewpoints are concerned, there was a lot of, groundwork which went towards building up opinion in favor of Bangladesh at that point of time. So this was the Testimonial of 60. Quite a few excerpts from Testimonial of 60 is there in our books. So anybody who bothers to read the book, buy the book and read the book, can get an idea of, what the international journalists and other people were saying. Thank you.
Thanks. We can open up for question. I'll go with one question that has already come, actually from classmate of ours, Ram Rao, has asked this question. Did you visit the spot where the surrender took place? Actually, we did, but by the time we reached there, fourth day, that was just a ground. The Chakravarti ground where, I mean, there was no major, what we remember, it's just the ground, there was nothing there as thing. Apparently, they have created a monument there at a later stage.
Thank you very much for your presentation. If I just, with Mrs. Padmaji's permission, can I just raise a few points, Padmaji? Yeah. From your description, it's so obvious that the war causes tremendous misery. It causes tremendous destruction. It causes refugee problems. You have covered each of these, but I would like to go one by one on each of these relating to what we see on television today in Ukraine and what you saw at firsthand in Bangladesh. We spoke about destruction. Now you see kind of destruction that is seen in the television today in Ukraine. Did you find a similar kind of destruction in Bangladesh when you went there? I'll ask one by one. So the destruction, you showed us some craters in an airfield, but did you see buildings like them?
Buildings, yes, completely. I mentioned, meeting some of the Bhakti Bahini youngsters who were helping the villagers reconstruct. In that village where we saw the entire village was broken. There was not a single roof that was up, even third day after the liberation when we reached there. And they were just putting up stones and, whatever material was there to create temporary.
I would like to put it slightly differently. What we saw was the destruction. We saw destruction of bridges. We saw destruction of the airstrip, which were caused by the Indian bombardment. But most of the destruction of the buildings that we saw were not done by the Indian soldiers. These were the destruction done by
Yes,
the
very much.
Pakistanis' own people on their own people.
On their own.
That is the
Absolutely,
point I
absolutely,
wanted to bring up.
absolutely.
We saw the
Perfect.
Indian side, we saw only the destruction we saw was the airstrips were taken off. We saw the bridges, certain bridges were blown off.
Absolutely. This
But,
is the
but
point.
we did not see
Absolutely.
any, not even in the proper Dhaka, we did not see a single, such a large force being captured, but we did not see a single building getting damaged by the Indian soldiers.
This is why
It
I
was
asked
something
this
which is
question.
unique.
This is why I raised this question.
Okay, okay. I didn't catch the
still wanted-
question properly. Yeah, I understood. Yes, yes. I think
So the
Shamal, good.
point, you see,
This
when
is
you
perfect.
destroy a bridge or when you
Yeah.
destroy an airfield, it's a part of a military operation.
Hmm.
When you destroy civilian buildings, it's a different issue altogether. And that is what I wanted to hear, that you did not see any major building destruction.
No, no, not by.
in bigger cities. So
Very
that's
clear.
one point we must remember. 50 years ago, we didn't do this. The
Yeah.
second issue is about how you reacted. Now, you know, when there's an occupation army, now there is a domestic army, like East Pakistan had a domestic army. And there's an attacking army, which is called the people who are going to go there and do all kinds of wrong things. Historically, you can see the ingressing army will do plunder, will do all kinds of rubbish there. You yourself said the Indian army was garlanded.
Yes.
So it is
Very much, very much.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's the point.
Yes.
We must understand as to how the war changes from culture to culture, from armies to armies, and from situations to situations. Here is an Indian army. You compare it with the Ukrainian army equivalent situation, or for that matter, the tyranny of the Pakistan army, as later even the Kargil operations. We will never go and destroy people. First of all, of course, as I started by saying, war is a horrible thing to happen. It only creates human misery. It only creates destruction. Today, what do we want? We want better standards of living. We want better medical care. We want better education. What does war do? Just the opposite of it. And while I say this, I am all the time looking at the television, seeing the images today, and the images of Bangladesh come back to me as to, did we really do this? And I find that we did not do this.
Did not.
That is something I wanted to hear from
Absolutely,
you.
absolutely.
First hand, within 4 days of arrival, by then no reconstruction had taken place. By then the refugee camps were where they were. So the refugee camps that you visited maybe in India were so different to the refugee camps that you finally saw in Bangladesh, if there were any.
Yeah, they were.
And so this is what you want to understand, that this is what war does, and this is what professional armies do, and this is what tyrant armies do. These are some things that
I think they're very powerful, General. I think you said that very nicely. Yes, I think.
And the other thing that just surprises me from your presentation is that you are never locked up by people saying, who are you? You don't have any passport, you don't have any visas. What are your documents that you're carrying to establish your identity?
One of the first questions that we had in mind when we decided to go, sure, don't we need a visa? Then we said, we don't even have passports. You know, at that time we didn't have passports. But once you are inside, there were times when we faced some kind of hostility, but at no point we were challenged by anybody, actually.
Yeah. In fact, an Indian Army major gave you a lift.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
But he never asked you to prove your identity, did he?
No.
What
The only time we had to prove our identity was when we were trying to get back. Shamal mentioned we got into that station, Gede, the local cops at 2 o'clock at night was harassing us. We showed our institute identity card. And otherwise we were never asked. No, actually, when I mentioned about being, surrounded by some people who were dressed like soldiers, who were bayoneted, poking us with the back, and we were taken to some place in a hut, and we were harassed for a while. There we showed the thing, and this was not again, some vandals who are doing this.
Back in India or at the Indian border.
Actually, I would like to add, our interaction with the Indian soldiers started at Bongaigaon station itself.
Oh, yeah.
Because the first refugee train that was leaving was under the supervision of certain Indian soldiers. They were there, army people. And when the refugees were objecting to us getting into the train, and we were being, thrown out of each compartment, ultimately one compartment we could somehow manage ourselves. There the Indian soldier came and asked us, why are you doing this? We said, we want to go and see what is the... He says, if that is the case, we'll carry you on our shoulders. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So it was such a lovely, that increased our enthusiasm to go ahead.
The other thing, which is of course more military, but I think many of my my participants would be, Bangladesh is a very riverine country, as you yourself said, huge rivers, and to cross those rivers is not easy because the enemy will always defend those rivers. The bridges will get destroyed. The Indian Army came out with something very unique at that time, which is called the concept of expanding torrents. Now that's a very military term, but I just thought I'll bring it here for you because it was created in Bangladesh war, and it is now worldwide known as an expanding torrent. Now what happens is when you come across a river like Madhumati, for example, it's a massive river. You've seen it for yourself.
Yeah.
To cross it is not easy. So when you stop, the enemy will completely be dominating you. Therefore, what do? You disperse and go by the sides. So expanding torrents, when water is stuck by a stone, what does water do? Water goes from the sides of the stone. So that's exact. And you look at this, I compare each one of these to Ukraine. Look at one river which is holding back the Russians on the capital.
Yes, okay.
If I can add something with the general, I think this was a glorious part of our history of both our country, and the Indian Army played the role of a liberation army, and they were strongly supported by the Bangladesh Freedom Forces and also the common people. And crossing the river was a major challenge. And two crossing I will especially mention. One is Meghna crossing, which is after Akhaura, and one is Brahmaputra crossing, which was very difficult. And it is 101 communication zone, which actually liberated Sherpur, and they made the Brahmaputra crossing. And also not at a particular point, but they spread out, and they were supported by the local people with their country boats. And they have joined the country boats and placed the planks of the army, and they took the heavy vehicles also in the country boats and crossed the river. And the Pakistani garrison in Jamalpur, they never thought that they could cross it overnight. And same with
Meghna River.
Meghna, yeah. And also,
the general who crossed it, the general made the plan to cross the general called General Sagat Singh.
Yeah, and also, Sagat Singh
name.
played a very important role.
And he comes from Jaipur, and his house in Meghna. So his property in Jaipur is called Meghna today.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
And also General Nagra and Brigadier Clare, who were the first to enter into Dhaka after crossing the Brahmaputra. So it is a remarkable achievement for an army, how the army, with the support from the people and also their allies. And I think we also remember and with our gratitude that more than 1,000 Indian soldiers had laid down their life for the liberation of Bangladesh. And we have their names in our museum, and also the country actually remembers them and pay tribute to them. So I think this bondage is now spent. Yeah.
The photograph that you see of surrender of the Pakistan Army and a large number of soldiers lined up and putting their pistols and guns on the ground is a picture that you can't see ever again. You've never seen it before, you'll never see it again. And 90,000 prisoners in modern warfare is something amazing.
That was an amazing number, 93.
But I think, Padmaji, we'll have to conclude because we can go on talking about the the Ukraine war. From my side, I only like to thank everyone for making such an interesting evening. And Padmaji, you may like to give a vote of thanks to the participants. But I want to say thank you so much, Padmaji, for having this put this all together.
Well, it was your suggestion. You were the one who introduced me to the book, and I read it. And of course, for me also, it brought back lots of memories, some painful, some others. But the good thing was, but one thing I would say, even at the time when we were leaving Bangladesh, we were being repatriated by plane and all that. The common people, all the vegetable sellers or the fruit sellers or people who were common people with whom one used to communicate, I was surprised when I came out of the house. They were there with folded hands almost and told us, Begum sahab, maaf, koi galti ho to maaf kar dena. Aur phir aana. I said, don't tell me this. I've done 2 postings in Pakistan, not the 3rd one here. But I mean, the time that we went through and see the pain of Bangladeshis at that time was terrible. But I would tell Mr. Mofidul Haq that, something I was given, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, when one of the meetings there, my husband had gone after you were the independence and all that. All the officers for their wives were presented Dhaka saris. So I still have that Dhaka sari with me.
Okay.
A real beautiful one. I've got other Dhakais which my husband bought, but this one has been special, which I passed on to my daughter-in-law who wears it.
Yeah, but I must also say thank you so much, Haq Saab. Every year you invite the India delegation to visit Bangladesh, and the one that visited in December last year, 2021, came back with fantastic memories. The kind of hospitality you extend to the Indian Army delegation that goes there every December is just outstanding. Thank you so much. On behalf of the government of India, we're really grateful to you.
Mr. Pandyan and Mr. Shamal, all of you, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's our honor that you are
for
able
giving
to
us this.
go through an experience like this, and whatever you are
Thank
talking
you.
about.
I mean, just an aside,
Yeah.
you know, these 4 people, they went with 50 rupees each in their pockets.
That was what surprised me
When
also.
they came back, they still had money in their
Yeah,
pockets.
we had money in the pocket.
Hospitality over there.
So, Haq, thank you once again for the wonderful hospitality which we enjoyed in Dhaka.
Very much. Yes. Yes.
Raj, we can close the meeting. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Right. Bye.